Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And I am, should I say it again? I'm so excited because it's becoming the thing I say first every week. I'm so excited about my guest this week. But I'm also super excited that April is National Humor Month. So I'm recording this in March, so I don't want to confuse myself, but April is the start of National Humor Month. So when you're hearing this, I hope you're finding something funny or that you find something funny soon because it's a month dedicated to the value of humor. And humor has such great value. And, we often think about laughter. There's actually a difference between humor and laughter. And I don't want to get all geeky, but we know that laughter is the physiological act of doing the ha 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 ha. And I do laughter yoga, and we focus just on that, the physical and the physiological laughter. But humor is different because I personally can find many things funny and I might not laugh out loud. So humor is about what we perceive as funny. It's something that helps us shift our perspective. It is something that helps us digest, I think, difficult messages easier. It helps us remember things. That's why a lot of commercials have humor in them. So humor can lead to laughter, but I think humor has so much value. It really ought to be in all of our toolboxes for life. And it's just so important. Make sure, and I'm going to give myself a plug here. If you're on Facebook, check out Laugh to Live. That's my face page. Yeah, my page. And I'll be putting a lot of stuff on there throughout the month of April. And throughout the month of April, be sure to tune in to this podcast because I am going to have on a different, funny, fabulous woman every week. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest this week, who I met through another comedian that you'll get to meet, Roya Hamadani. I met her through the Lehigh Valley group for comedy for women. And so if you're someone who wants to learn more about humor, wants to learn more about comedy, make sure you check out the Lehigh Valley women. And I'm messing up the name, I'm sure, but Aliya can correct me. But please get ready for my guest. I'd like to welcome Aliya Brown. Hello, Aliya.
Hello. It's so
How
good
are
to
you
be here.
doing?
I'm doing
Good.
so good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And I should probably write stuff down before I start blathering because I'm like, oh, and another thing, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sorry. I tend to just blurt out at the microphone every week.
That's okay. Improv, huh?
Yes, I'm improvising. That was fabulous. Um, so you're a funny person, and I met you through
Thank you.
Roya. And
Yes.
I want to make sure I get the name right. It's Lehigh Valley Women's StandUp, is it, or what's the correct name on Facebook?
So we're Lehigh Valley Stand-Up Women.
Okay.
It is a much longer name than it probably needs to be. That's why a lot of times we just abbreviate to LV Stand-Up Women, or just Stand-Up Women is just shorthand for it. But yeah, Lehigh Valley Stand Up Women. So we reach out to and want to engage with anyone who is interested in comedy and or performing comedy in the Lehigh Valley area and branching out surrounding. So up to your area in Scranton, and also we have a couple members who are in the Philly area.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, and I know that's how we met because I do shows at wineries, and I forget who introduced me to, oh gosh, I think it was, I can't even remember now. They introduced me, told me about Megan Getz, and she told me about Roya. And then through Roya, I met you because of this fabulous group of women who occasionally meet. And at the time it was at Wegmans in is it the Bethlehem area there? The Wegmans there?
Yeah, the Wegmans in Bethlehem. Yeah.
Yeah, meeting to just talk about ideas for writing comedy and sharing some things you're trying to work on, and get people's input. So that's where I met you, and then we actually got to perform together in a show that Roya and a bunch of you gals worked on, and that was at a cool gallery. What was the name of that gallery? I can't remember.
So that was at the Alternative Gallery in Allentown.
That's
They've
right.
always been a huge supporter of the performing arts. So we had our first Lehigh Valley Stand Up Women produced comedy festival called the Blood Moon Festival. And it was so wonderful to meet you there.
Yeah, it what a great night of entertainment. It was so wonderful. And that happened. I remember that was February, the month before the world shut down, March, 2020. So I was so
Mhm.
glad that I was able to be there and that everyone was able to be there because it was such a great night of laughs. So that was something to kind of help us, carry away in our hearts and just kind of like have a good night before things kind of like basically shut down. And then everything slowly became online. And then we're slowly getting back out there, which is awesome.
Mhm.
And I know that you've got a ton of things going on. You produce different shows that are mostly held at the Steel Stacks in Bethlehem. Is that right?
That is true. So, I currently am working on, I would say, 3 main projects. So, I have 2 projects at the Steel Stacks right now. My first project is a game show called Swipe Right, the online dating game show, in which I basically go through all of the garbage on Tinder so you don't have to. And, because I hate myself, and, I find bios that have problems, and I take out keywords or phrases from them, and then teams of comedians compete to build a better bio, kind of Mad Lib style, and we get to see what they come up with, compare it with the original, laugh together about what people feel comfortable posting on the internet, and it's a really fun time. So that's my first project. My second project, that I'm working on with Steel Stacks is a slumber party themed stand-up showcase. I'm very excited for that. That's coming up on April 30th. So comedians are going to be performing their set. It doesn't have to necessarily be slumber party themed, the content of their set, but they are encouraged to wear pajamas while they do it.
I love it.
And the whole audience is also encouraged to wear pajamas. I want everybody to be comfy cozy, and then at the end of their set, we're going to be playing Truth or Dare with audience suggestions as well as a couple of my own, and I'm so looking forward to that. I'm very excited about that.
That sounds like so much fun. I'm picturing like a scene out of like Grease where they're like piercing each other's ears and drinking and I don't
Exactly. That's the exact vibe I'm going for.
know.
Uh, and then my third project that I'm working on is that I co-produce a show called Cold Fusion Comedy, which is a comedy variety show, and that is at the Ice House in Bethlehem, and that is through a group called Ice House Tonight that is trying to do regular programming in that space in Bethlehem. And our next show is April 20th. So I think we have a couple people who do acrobatics performing at the show. We
Wow.
have, I think, 3 improv groups and we have 3 stand-up comedians. So it's going to be a blast.
That's great. Well, there's many opportunities then, especially in your area in the Lehigh Valley for people to get out and have some humor, inject some humor into their lives and do some hearty laughing, hopefully. Well,
Absolutely.
I want to talk about how you got into comedy, but first I wanted to ask you what makes you laugh? Like, what are some things that you find funny? Everything from, just everyday life to like favorite comedians. What makes Aliya Brown laugh?
Oh, that is a good question, but it also is so complicated to answer. Um, the first thing that I want to talk about is my favorite like trope in movies is when somebody gets stabbed with a fork. It does not happen often, but it happens often enough that it makes me laugh. I think it's just a very funny thing to get stabbed with. Also, uh, in the same realm of things, I think television makes me laugh probably the most. Um, right now, I'm watching Bob's Burgers over and over and over and over again, and that is my current favorite source of humor. But my favorite way to watch it now is I watch it strictly on YouTube. So it's somebody recording the show, and in order to get it not pulled down from YouTube, they need to like do like weird cuts and zooms. So like the content looks a little off, and then at the very bottom right-hand corner, there's a person doing a TED Talk, like layered over the episode of Bob's Burgers. And those little changes to keep it up there just make me laugh so much because somebody loves Bob's Burgers enough to go through all that trouble to make it free and accessible on YouTube. So it does make me laugh.
Well, how about, are there any comedians in particular? It's funny, I'm going to sound like this old lady now, because Aliya is, for those of you who aren't watching the YouTube, if you're listening, Aliya is quite a bit younger than me. And I don't know, I'm going to sound like, what are your kids into these days? Like, I feel like I don't know if younger people have well, obviously you have comedians that you like, right, who do stand up, but I don't know, I just feel like it's, I don't, it might sound weird for me to say I don't feel like it's as big as it was years ago, but I don't know. And I don't, again, I don't know if I know what the hell I'm talking about, if I'm off my rocker, but like, do you have certain stand-up comedians besides obviously the women that you work with locally, and the folks you work with locally, but like anyone that stands out that you really like watching their specials, or that you would go see in, in person?
So my favorite stand-up comedian currently is Mike Birbiglia. I think that he has such a clever grasp on what's funny about being sad, and he also has I feel like it's almost poetic the way that he's able to tell a story the whole entire hour and, like, pull through little bits throughout the story, but he always finds his way back, and there's always such sentimental meaning in the jokes that he told to get you through the story. So, I highly recommend him all the time. Um, Even though I feel personally slighted by him because he was coming to our area and, either him and his team were shown my video along with a couple other comedians' videos to see if he wanted a local opener, and he did not select me, and I was like, "This is why you don't meet your heroes," but I still went to the show. But yeah,
See,
no.
that was nice of you to still go.
So even though he wouldn't recommend me, I would recommend him. Um, and, uh, like you said, I do watch more local comedy than I do watch, like, comedy, um, like, stand-up comedy directly, like, online or, like, on Netflix or something like that, and I think that, you know, more people my age so I'm 23, so I think that people my age and younger, consume more, like, smaller video clips, of sketches instead of, like, long form stand-up comedy.
Hmm.
Um, so of course, like, I am on TikTok and, like, I partake in things on there, but not a lot of stand-up on there, I'd say. I did meet one comedian, or I did find one comedian from TikTok that I enjoy a lot. Her name is Robin Tran, and, I think she's see, I forget where she's based out of. Um, but yeah, so, TikTok did find me to her, so I do like her stand up a lot as well.
Okay. When I taught, I don't teach anymore because I realized it really wasn't for me and my sanity. But I was teaching part time at King's College here in, well, it's in Wilkes-Barre. And part of the public speaking course that I taught, I think I was the only professor who did it. I had one of their speeches, I made sure that it was a comedy monologue that the students would do. And it was interesting to ask the students, because, and this is only a couple of years ago, but again, obviously they're much younger than me, 18 to 19 years old. I would ask them like who their favorite comedians were. And kind of like your answer, a lot of them didn't really watch a lot of comedy, or some of them would like, they would mention a sketch show instead or whatever. And I'm like, no,
Mhm.
stand up. But a lot of them didn't have favorites. But then the ones who did would mention people like John Mulaney, Gabriel Iglesias, I think. I think that's his name. Am I getting that right? I think it's Gabriel
Yeah,
Iglesias.
Gabriel Iglesias, yeah.
Yes, that's right. And I'm trying to think, not, I mean, there were a couple other folks that I had not heard of, a couple guys that they had mentioned, but a lot of them just didn't have a favorite. And I would show them like Ellen DeGeneres's appearance on Johnny Carson, because that was really big. She was asked to go over and sit on the couch with Johnny Carson. And so that monologue was pretty famous. And I love the story behind it, which I didn't know for the longest time, that she when her girlfriend was killed, that she was like, and I guess supposedly her, if the story is right, of course everything gets romanticized, but she's sitting there in this terrible apartment with fleas, and she's like, what purpose do they serve? And that kind of led to her writing part of that monologue, which I think is so indicative of comedy anyway. I mean, they say, I had gone to a couple workshops by Judy Carter and I used her book, Comedy Bible, and it's like you look for the pain points in your life, right? And you write about that. I would you agree? Like, I mean, you and Roy have taught comedy, and you, of course, have been doing it for a long time. Would you agree that that's true, or do you think that's a certain style that maybe not everyone believes that we are best like comedy? A lot of it comes from the pain or the challenges of life.
So, I don't think that all comedy needs that, but I think that the richest comedy comes from that. Just in my personal opinion, I feel like you have to have that understanding of those low points in order to calculate how to get to the high points. So, every comedian that I know who always masters that the best has a tragic backstory, or they've been through, something that helped them, you know. You gotta get to a place where you need that lightness in your life in order to find it, you know?
Hmm. Would you think that, to that point, do you think that well, like you said, you don't have to have it, but like, so can you live a decent life overall without having anything horrible happen to you and still write good comedy? Do you think?
Well, I think John Mulaney is a somewhat decent-ish example of that from the outside, right? He had a very loving childhood and a very good upbringing, and his parents couldn't have been more supportive of him. They helped him pay for his schooling, and that's where he got to meet a lot of his funnier friends. And through like his life experiences, then like formed humor from that, and comedy stemmed from that. And I think that he has a great, you know, uh, grab or grasp of like the mathematics behind comedy to craft like well executed jokes. I think he is excels in that arena. And so of course like now like in his adulthood there are like other struggles that he has gone through, and the whole wide world knows what he is going through in the modern
Yeah.
era. Um, but I think before that, he had, a great grasp on comedy and what was funny, and um, I didn't think that, to my knowledge, he did not have a very tragic story behind that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think I mean, from what I've seen, I don't know exactly his full story, but, like, I think he had gone through, rehab and things like that a few times, so, and I
Mhm.
mean, wherever that comes from, everybody's got their own journey and what causes some kind of addiction, but, I'm sure that if you can find, you use those pain points to get to the humor too, that's, can be rewarding for the person delivering it, but also for the audience as well. Um,
Yeah.
so we're talking about like humor, the writing of it. So we might as well rewind to Aliya, a young preteen Aliya who did stand up for the first time. It impresses the hell out of me that I mean, I was like, I don't know, 28, 29 when I did stand up, and I had to go to Houston to do it because I was afraid to be, mocked here in Pennsylvania. So I'm visiting a friend, and it took twice me visiting her in Houston to try it. Here you are, 11 years old, and you did your first stand up. So how does that happen? Like, and shouldn't you be in school? No, I'm just kidding. So how did that whole thing happen? And to be so brave at such a young age, share how did that come about?
So, a little about me is that, I love attention, always have. And, my father started stand-up when I was around that age, and he was going very regularly to an open mic at the Bethlehem Brew Works. At the time, I think it was called Tickle Me Tryouts, and then, I think, like, the 2nd Tuesday of every month, they would have Tickle Me Tuesdays, where, just, like, the best names, uh, where, like, the, performers who were the most regular and, like, were doing a good job at, the tryouts would then get to be on the showcase show. And so my father was regularly going to that at the time, and then he, like, quickly jumped off and started doing more things, and I would go to them with him, and it just looked so appealing to me to be, you know, upstage not only performing jokes, but I loved the, like, behind the scenes writing of the jokes. So, I was 11 and I had written a couple of my own jokes, and I was like, "Dad, do you think I could go up? Do you think I could go up at the Brewworks?" And he was like, "I don't know, I don't see why not." So he was very supportive from day one, and, he, like, let the host know that this was something that I wanted to try, and I think they put me on first, and, uh, I went up on stage, and immediately I made fun of one of the regular guys and, broke the ice, and then I got into the jokes. So
So when
that
you wrote those jokes, I don't mean to interrupt, but did you have like like I don't want to say training, but did you have a sense of the formula of writing, or did your dad like go over it, or were you just like, I got this?
I was just like, "You know what? I got this." Um, I had seen enough comedy, I feel like, to get, a grasp of, what do I find funny? How does basic joke structure go? And my dad let me go off on my own, and the fact that he trusted me without wanting to, like, peer review or to help me write or, whatever, that meant a lot to me. And he's still the same way. He does not touch any of my jokes. He gives no input on my jokes. I give input on his jokes. But yeah, he really gave me that space, and I think just from growing up watching comedy, my both of my parents being big fans of comedy, and then getting to see my dad at shows and stuff and watch him write, I feel like that influenced my ability to recognize, like, "Okay, here's how jokes work."
Now, does your dad, so your dad still does comedy?
Yes.
Okay. And is he local or?
Yep. My dad in 2018, he put out an album called Jokes Through the Bathroom Door, and it charted number 5 on Billboard when on its release week. So, we're really excited about
Wow.
that.
And what is,
Yeah.
I don't know, and I'm ashamed to say I don't know your dad's name. What is your dad's name?
His name is Jason Brown.
Okay, well, that's cool. Well, let's give a shout out to dad, even though dad, you're not the focus tonight, but still.
Yeah.
But hey, that's nice. So he really helped. He was kind of part inspiration for you to try this and gave you the space to do it your own way. And you got up there. And how
Mhm.
was the experience? Was it rewarding?
Yeah, definitely, especially because, like, afterwards, everybody was they couldn't have been nicer and more supportive to me. And just like, I don't know, I was a kid at a bar telling jokes with everybody. So, very much, treated like an 11-year-old, but also I felt a little bit of respect, so it was nice.
Well, that's cool.
Very, very encouraging.
Now, did you keep that up on a steady basis after that first time?
No, not until was I didn't go back on stage again until I'd say I was, like, 14. Um, then I did, every now and then I would do the open mic that, my dad was running at the Alternative Gallery, which, we mentioned before, that was the place where the Blood Moon Festival took place. My dad was running an open mic there called Social Medium, and, every now and then I would host, and every now and then I would, like, do a couple jokes or something. Um, and then when I was 16, I started taking it more seriously. So then I was consistently going up at that open mic. And my dad was hosting regularly at a club near us called Wisecrackers, which no longer exists down our way, but there's one at the Mohegan Sun up by you.
Hmm.
And so my dad was hosting there every weekend. And so I would like go like do like a little here and there then. And that was also the age that I auditioned for America's Got Talent.
Oh, so it was, so you were 16 then, is that right?
I
You
was
were
I was 16.
okay.
Yep.
So that, how was that? And where did you go to New York? Tell us about that.
So my father and I were both auditioning, and we went to New York City, and that's where we learned that everyone who auditions in person in New York City is there for B-roll. So all of these shows that are like competition shows are heavily produced ahead of time. I got to meet a couple of people who, like America's Got Talent, reached out to like their agency, or like a couple students from a piano school, like their teacher got a call to like please send students, things like that. A couple dance companies, and so on. And we were there all day. I got to perform 1 minute and 30 seconds worth of jokes for 3 producers, and they were so kind and so encouraging afterwards, and they basically explained to me, like, "This isn't against you. This is how we do the show. It is all pre-produced, but you were very good, and please don't ever stop doing this," which was encouraging to hear. But I did immediately stop doing comedy after that did not work out the way I
Oh,
wanted it to. 'Cause I was a kid and I was like, "Well, my feelings are hurt, so
hey, you
I'm
were
not gonna do
16.
this for a
Adults do
while."
this all the time. We do. Our responses are very similar. Well, that's a bummer
Yeah.
though, that it did kind of, dampen your spirit a little bit.
Yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm kind of glad that that was the route that happened, and also that, like, the illusion of, reality TV competition shows was broken for me. Also, sorry, America's Got Talent, if I signed anything in the past that said that I wouldn't tell people you're fake, pretend you didn't hear this. That's
You mean it's not somebody who has just been living in a trailer park singing to their dogs and all of a sudden they're discovered?
so that's where that set of auditions is where they find, like, the really, really bad acts that go up to be made fun of on the show, which I think is cruel because these people, they get their hopes up. They go to New York at, like, oh dark stupid in the morning, and not only do you, like, bait them by putting them on the show, like, you put them on the show to crush them, and, then they go viral for being silly on TV, so but yeah, that's who they find at at the open auditions. They find B-roll, and they find the people that they're just walking off the streets of New York City that they wanna make fun of,
Hmm.
so
Well, I didn't really have too many high hopes about reality shows because everyone says how they're all scripted. So I'm not dashed
fair
on
enough.
that. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure you still took, so your spirits were dampened a little bit, but I'm sure you learned from the experience. And it was still probably pretty cool. I mean, I think it's still brave that you even went, you know what I mean? That's pretty cool.
Thank
How did
you.
I imagine your father fared similarly, or
Oh, he was fine.
he was fine?
He Yeah, he had very low expectations for how it would all go because he was an adult man who understood reality TV, and I was a gullible 16-year-old. But yeah, no, he kept calm, he carried on.
That's good for you, Dad.
Yeah.
So 16, you're kind of you stop for a while. So then when did you start picking it back up again?
I would say back again when I was oh, gee. I think when I was 18 was
Okay.
when I started picking back up again, and then I started going very consistently, like, every week I was doing at least 3 things stand-up related in 2018, and I was 20 then.
And you've been pretty I mean, I
I've
can't say
been
pretty
yeah,
consistent. Yeah.
I've been consistent ever since.
Okay.
Even with the shutdowns from the pandemic, the second everything moved online, I hopped with it.
That's great. Yeah. So
So,
you didn't lose time in that sense because you were able to do it online. How was
yeah.
that experience? I will admit I've done, like, I do laughter yoga and I've done that online where I would like lead it, but I've never done, and I do want to do that open mic on Monday, one of these days, the one that's online, but I haven't done it yet. How is that experience performing comedy online? What's that like?
It is both my favorite and my least favorite thing right now. I love it so much, but, and one of my favorite things about it is how what a variety of people are on there, and, just getting to meet people and form, like, genuine friendships and comedy relationships with people from, outside of my Lehigh Valley bubble, right, has been a worthwhile experience. But also there's some people on there. But, doing Zoom mics from a more professional standpoint has been difficult because it's hard to gauge audience reaction. So what I'm going off of or like what I get out of those sets has changed from a live performance. So at like a live open mic, I would be gauging audience reaction. I would be gauging it based off of my wording. I would be gauging it off of my delivery, off of how I'm standing on stage. Like there's so many things that I'm taking in all at once, and I'm going off of how well I'm doing it by audience reaction. And on Zoom, oftentimes I'm talking to like three people who have their cameras off. One guy's making a sandwich, a girl's hitting a blunt. Like it's like a whole variety of people doing different things. And so now instead of gauging it off of audience reaction, I'm really leaning on like my internal sense of what's funny and did I like my wording? Did I like my delivery? Um like how am I going to translate that to stage later if I get the chance, right? With COVID and everything and the waves going up and down, lots of things get scheduled, moved, bumped, what have you.
Yeah.
Um, so I really went from leaning on audience reaction to leaning on myself and my reaction, and I think that it has made me a better writer, I'd say.
Well, that's great because it's a completely different perspective, but so there's still value in it. Um,
Yeah.
and you're looking at yourself because again, I know we all like the feedback from other people, but sometimes it's just like you have to go, oh, who gives a shit if if they thought it was funny or not, you know what I mean? Because who are
Yeah.
they? Who's any of us really? But the silliest thought that's in my head or question, I'm like, because I haven't been to one of these, is like, do you stand or do you sit when you're doing these?
I sit. I
Okay.
think the majority of people sitting. There are a few people who sit but hold a microphone,
Okay.
and which is not my style. And there are people who like have set up little like studios almost, and they stand.
Okay.
And the funny thing about like the online culture is that that person's the weirdo. So, like, they're doing everything that traditionally you would think someone should do if they're going to be doing stand-up online. Like, they're making their own little area, they're setting it all up, they're standing, they're making sure that they're in frame, and they're giving you everything that you would give into one of the like, a regular performance. But everybody's like, "What a weirdo. Why is that guy standing?" Because there's this, like, weird level of intimacy on Zoom. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's almost too formal for how intimate of a setting it is. Because, like, whether you recognize it in the moment or not, like, you're sitting with everybody in their living room right now. So, it'd be weird if I just started standing in your living room and was like, "Hi, Janine. Can I tell you 5 minutes of things that have been on my mind?" Like, that's uncomfortable.
Might be a little off-putting, right?
A little bit. So I find sitting, like, keeping, and acknowledging that intimacy and casualty of the situation helps me do better in that context.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I can't wait to see it and try it because I just think it's something it should be experienced. And why not, right? I think that's pretty cool. So Monday nights, for those folks who do want to check it out, I know you had told me about it. So Monday nights around, is it like 8 or 7:30? When does it take place on Zoom?
So it starts at 8 p.m. Eastern technically, but, with like waiting for everybody to get into the room and stuff and put the list together, sets don't usually start until about 8:30.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty cool. And I'll mention that when I post this podcast too. Cause now is it every week? And this is
Every
something that will
week.
probably continue for a while, you think?
Yeah, they don't plan on taking it offline anytime soon, I don't think.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, that's neat what you said too before about like getting outside your Lehigh Valley bubble, because I mean, that's the thing with Zoom. You could have people from anywhere hopping on doing some
Yeah.
comedy and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
I've
Yeah.
gotten to perform on shows based out of Toronto because of Zoom, and I've gotten to perform in a festival based out of England because of Zoom. And Stephanie, who runs the Monday Night Open Mic, Stephanie Parker is a Philadelphia-based comedian, and she runs that open mic that I attend on Zoom on Mondays. She regularly performs in Northern Ireland. Uh, and that's all because of Zoom. So, and we
That's
have
wild.
friends from Hawaii and Oregon, and they tune in regularly for the open mic. The Canadians come regularly for the open mic, and every now and then we get a Brit or an Irishman into the open mic, or a very charismatic Welshman also. So
I love that variety because I'm actually all three. I'm Irish, Welsh, and English. So
I love that. Yeah.
that's cool. Let me ask, is there any, obviously everyone is your audience when you're, or should be when you're talking, but is there anyone that shows up just to be an audience member, or is this basically all people who are doing the open mic?
Yeah, we get a couple regular audience members as well. And the fun thing about this is, so we've been on Zoom for 2 years. And
Oh,
so
wow.
everyone, I know, can you believe it already?
Crazy.
But so everybody who goes there regularly has become this really tight-knit group of friends, and I love it so much, and that includes, like, our regular audience members as well. And I even, became, like, such close friends with one that I stayed with her for about 3 months, and I was living in Philadelphia for a while. So, that's how, like, life-changing this has been for me. Like, I met, like, someone who we became, like, that close of friends with. But yeah, so she comes every week. Her name is Hannah. She's the best audience member in the whole wide world. And, we also have her boyfriend, named Randy, who he comes, and our other friend now named Essie, and he comes regularly just to watch. But every now and then we get like a good handful.
That's great. Okay. Now I absolutely, I think Monday, I forget if I was recording a podcast or I forgot. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. Like, and I think I'll admit to you that there's part of me that's scared, because I haven't done a Zoom open mic and I'm like, oh my God, what if I'm just doing these jokes and I don't hear one laugh? But I guess I need to get that out of my head and just like hop on and do it.
I promise to, and I keep telling this to people. One of my favorite things about open mics, but especially about Zoom open mics, is that it couldn't be a better display of how low the bar really is. Like, because the bar is too low for anyone to be being that mean and critical to themselves. Like last Monday, someone who is my friend, but they are a character, was in the middle of his set, and then all of a sudden had to mute himself and tilt the camera up because he was going to vomit, because earlier he had eaten shrimp that he bought from 7-Eleven.
Oh my
And
God.
just like, in the middle of your set, do a quick bomb. And then after, when he was done bombing, he was like, "All right, gang, I'm back at it. Here's the rest of my jokes." So really, like, the bar is very, 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 very low. And especially that room, like, everybody couldn't be more accepting and kind and nice and, tolerant of a lot of buffoonery is what I'll say.
Well, that I don't know if I want to come, if I feel more but glad that I want to try it or worse. I don't
Yeah,
know.
like, I don't wanna scare you away, but also the
I like
bar.
that you're saying it's so welcoming though, too. And that it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're joking with the bar is low, but I mean, it's kind of like, just do it, like anything goes. And it's like,
Well, yeah, I
that's kind
find
of cool.
comfort in it. I find comfort in that statement. So I don't mean that statement to be insulting by any
No,
means,
no.
but like it, if you mess up, everybody will say like you're doing great and they'll keep you going, you know? Like you could be like face down vomiting in a bucket and everybody's like, "You got this, bud. We're here when you're ready."
That sounds
So
like a really nice group of folks then.
yeah, super supportive.
Now, is
That
it
that
run? I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, is it run like a regular mic so that like Stephanie's like hosting it and running it?
Yeah, so Stephanie hosts it. She does like the little banter in between people, and everybody gets 6-minute sets. And so lighting people is such an issue on Zoom. And I have yet to attend a mic or a show that does it the same. There's actually a regular mic on Tuesdays that is like, we're not lighting you. Like, you just have to be honest that you know what time it is and stop your set. But so Stephanie puts up like a little emoji icon to let everybody know like you have a minute left.
Well, that's
Um
a good idea. I think that's pretty
yeah.
helpful, right?
Yeah, but it's definitely more casual in that like in between sets, like if somebody wanted to like shout out some like if you just finished your set and somebody wanted to be like, Janine, I love that part where you talked about that thing. And then you'd be like, oh well, thank you. And then like there'd be like a little bit of like that conversation or that banter there. Or like sometimes if like somebody's like, hey, you used a word that I don't recognize. What were you talking about there? Then it's like, okay, well now we're talking about that for a little bit, you know?
Well, that's
So
cool. That's like a whole different vibe. I think that's pretty neat.
yeah, it definitely feels a lot more like friends hanging out and talking than it feels like an open mic. But there still is that open mic structure of like you get 6 minutes where just you are doing your set and everybody is, you know, to the best of their individual abilities, they are listening.
Are they, for the most part, muted, or are you hearing dogs barking and all kinds of crazy stuff in the
Oh no,
background?
super polite. Or Stephanie or I mute people if there's like an issue. That is a wonderful thing about Zoom is that if somebody's like doing something you don't like, you can just mute it. And also the ability to kick people out. Oh, chef's kiss. I wish I could do that in person.
That's, you know what? That's a perfect segue because I want to bring up real in-person open mics. And while I never, and shame on me because I'm like an old lady, I hate driving at night anymore and I could give a million excuses. I won't. I'm, being a weenie. I never did get down to Roya used to do the open mic. I think at Brewworks, right? It was held at
Yep.
Brewworks on Tuesday nights. And I would just love reading the recaps in the Lehigh Valley, the women's group, the chat about the various hooligans or different difficult male comedians who would mock or do all of their dick jokes or whatever. Let's talk about that for a minute. I mean,
Let's.
obviously some open mics are coming back in person, but tell me about some of the challenges of that. And I mean, for me, I like to talk about what it's like doing anything as a woman. You know what I mean? Like, I know and again, this could be a generational thing too, because I have met people who are like, well, why do you have to separate? I think it's necessary because I don't believe that women are still, treated it equal. So I like to focus on women. I like to say this is for women, and like with my ladies' nights. So for me, I want to ask you, like, how do you feel about the challenges as a woman? And then is that tied to like the behavior and how you guys you were respected or not respected a lot of times at that open mic? And I know that's like a huge question, but however you want to address it.
No, definitely. I feel like I agree with you wholeheartedly that women in so many areas and spectrums of life are treated way differently than men are treated in society, and it especially like shows itself at least in my own personal life in comedy. um like I've been in situations before like in person where like I was talking, I thought as an equal in like a group of people, and then like another man would come in and like say hi to everybody in that group of people but me. Like he'd shake everyone's hand but
Mm.
me. Or I'll be in a situation like that and everybody gets their hand shaken, but for some reason the man feels like he has to hug me. Uh,
Yeah, because
Or
that's
I'll
what you were
be
waiting for, right?
yeah, or I'll be, hosting the mic, and instead of shaking my hand, you feel the need to hug me. Why are we touching me? I would prefer the guy who ignores me to the guy who's like, "Ah, get in here for a big lady hug, you lady." Um, yeah, so that's yeah, glad that I don't have to do that anymore. I recently hosted an in-person mic not so recently. I suppose it was over the summer. I hosted an in-person mic, and I gave a big disclaimer that I was not going to be shaking anybody's hands, and then to play it off as a joke instead of, everybody knew that the underlying subtext is like, "Yes, because of COVID, I will not be shaking your hand." But I said, "Because it is really hot today, and I know that like 98% of you are not washing your hands after you adjust your swamp ass. So I will not be shaking your hands." And because that is just how I talk to rooms full of men. And one man did not listen to me at the beginning, give any of the rules. And he did not listen then to my set. He had his head in his phone the whole time, felt like texting him, the rules. That way he'd actually see it. And then he went up to go do his set. I did not shake his hand, and depending on the kind of person you are, that can be, like, a sign of huge disrespect. Had I not given a disclaimer up front that I would not be shaking hands. So he spent the whole first minute of his set complaining about me at the mic that I was hosting, that I wouldn't shake his hand. So then when it was time for me to take him off stage, I went back up and I said, "So I feel like this, needs repeating since obviously not all of us caught me in the beginning. I did say in the beginning that I would not be shaking anyone's hand. So I don't want you to feel personally slighted, even though if I put everyone in a lineup, I would pick you to be most likely to not wash your hands after adjusting your swamp ass." So I got my dig in, but like that was such a weird disrespect for, like, the silly games people play, etiquette-wise with stand-up. So interesting. That meant so much to him that I wouldn't shake his hand, and yet I've dealt with being completely ignored
Mhm.
and have had to, like, move on and be fine, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think in my experience, and I guess I know everything is different and generational, but I find, especially over the last couple of years, I don't know if it's my age, my hormones, or more that I'm experiencing and different people I'm working with. I feel like middle-aged or older white men and maybe young men too are more insecure and sensitive. They talk about women and like this whole BS story that's been told for most of our lives about women being the emotional ones. I find that men are bigger crybabies over things, like honestly, that their feelings get hurt. And again, to any men who are listening, if you are listening, I'm not a man hater, so I'm not trying to say that at all, but in my experience, I do feel that their egos and the toughness is just like this front, and that I feel like their feelings get hurt more easily. And if they had to deal with like half of what women deal with, I think they'd be puddles on the ground. But
I
that's just
think
me.
the I think the major difference is they feel like they have an entitlement to expressing their discontent with the situation because they also feel entitled to having it go their way. And women are told you are entitled to nothing, nothing will go your way, and it's your job to fix everything so that way it goes my way. And so when confronted with that, entitlement complex and when things don't work out your way, it's hard to, you know, grapple with that. And I feel like that's a great example of how the patriarchy harms everyone. It sets men up for disaster because it is not teaching them realistic expectations and, troubleshooting and, emotional management. And it is teaching women that it's their job to anticipate everyone's needs and regulate everyone's emotions and be available to fix everything when that is asking way too much of everyone involved. So it hurts it and again, doubling down on I'm not a man hater. I feel bad that the patriarchy has done this also to men.
Yes. Yeah.
It
Yeah,
it
that's
is it
right.
is it's bad for everyone, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
How do you feel like, do you ever have that come out in your comedy? Like, well, obviously, like, okay, with that guy, that was just like responding to him and how he had, harassed or complained about you for a minute. But like when you are writing stuff, I mean, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with, what's going on with your life and different things and how you're feeling. How much of your comedy would you say that influences, like experiences as a woman and the world we live in now?
So currently, my better and like most worked on bits are all an interaction with a man that has been questionable and or horrible, and then like my reaction to it and my perspective on the situation. um so I feel like it significantly influences my comedy, like more so than I thought, because like in my head, like I feel like a lot of what I write about can just get chalked up to like, oh, that's a dating story. But when you break down like the pieces of it, it's like, no, that man was horrible to me. And I'm processing how I feel about it by telling it through stand-up comedy now. So, my most recent bit that I've been working on is about online dating as a fat woman. Hello, people just listening. I am fat. And um, a man commented on a full body photo of me on this dating site. It's called Hinge, if anybody wants to delete it off their phone. And this man commented, "Damn, you pretty cute for a big girl." Which is not a compliment. So then I had to decide, like, well, am I going to reply to him or am I gonna like ignore it and move on? And I decided to reply, "Wow, you're pretty dumb for a bald guy." So then that sparked a really, really long back and forth between me and this guy where he was just laying into me with insults, just basically saying like every fat joke that I've ever heard in my whole life existing as a fat person, especially a fat woman, and then me critiquing his jokes because this is my job.
Like he had no
And
idea who he was messing with.
oh yeah, no, absolutely. And the way that the conversation transpired was he stepped over a big line with me and I took a screenshot of what he said and I sent it to his mother on Facebook.
Oh
And then
gosh.
he wrote me a very, very long apology. And it started with, "My mom did not make me write this. I am apologizing to you because I am a man of character."
Hmm.
Yeah. So after that whole experience, I was like, "Well, I need to write about this." I need to tell everyone I know, exactly what happened and how it went down. And so I've been in the process of turning that into a stand-up set since December, and I'm
Oh wow.
still, like, not happy with it, and I keep writing it and rewriting it and doing it different places, and but yeah, that's all. "A man was horrible to me. Here's how I handled it, and then here's how I feel about it," is a lot of, what my comedy ends up being.
Yeah. And you mentioned and you said, you said I'm fat, right? So you said
Mhm.
that. How much would you say, and obviously you said you've heard the jokes, I mean, people can be cruel, about a lot of things, but how much of that has influenced your comedy too, or the way that you use humor in your life?
So, um, I've always been fat, like, I've been a fat kid. I grew up into a fat adult. And I definitely feel like humor is one of, the strongest coping mechanisms, um, that, you know, I have in my arsenal. Because like, it's better to show that, like, they didn't hurt you, and the best way to communicate that is, "Well, I'm laughing about it, bro." Like, it so I definitely feel like I've leaned on that pretty much my whole life, and I do feel like that helped develop, how I cope with those things when they do happen to me, and then, like, help me form and rewrite my sense of humor, right? But locally, me being fat has like in how I responded to somebody in their comedy regarding that has impacted and changed like my whole relationship with my local scene. Um, so at that open mic that Roya and her husband Ian used to host, there was a man there who did a set in which he was talking. Am I allowed to curse
Yeah.
on your program?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have already, but I feel like I should have asked. So, so this man was talking about how easy it is to fuck fat girls, because all you have to do is like buy them Arby's and then just like degrade their self-esteem. But it's not that hard to do because their self-esteem is already so low because of how fat they are. And like that was the essence of the bit. And he was making eye contact with me for a good chunk of it. And I already had beef with this guy. I don't feel like he's funny. However, I do feel like people who I don't find funny still have just as much a right to the stage as I do. Um, but this guy has already like he got a open mic that I really like shut down because it was at a family owned like bar and grill place, and he just was told not to use a ton of profanity because there were families there. He brought a broken guitar and started strumming on it and just yelled the F word over and over again and got the mic shut down. So I had beef with him from that.
Mm.
And so in that moment, I'm getting enraged. And also too, I that stage to me in general is very sentimental to me. So my dad used to host that open mic and there was no stage. And my dad, me, and my dad's friend Glenn all built the stage together and painted it together. And then I went to that open mic where that man was standing on the stage that I built and he was saying those things. And so it was hitting me a lot harder. And then a man went up after him. The man's fat, and he made a self-deprecating joke to cope with the air in the room. And even though I also do not find that man funny, my heart broke for him, but he felt the need to hurt himself in order to move on with how that guy was already talking about fat people. And then the next person up was a woman who was an older fat woman, and she made a self deprecating joke to pick up and move on. So obviously, like the tension was still hurting people, and it's not. And she never came back. Too is
Uh,
another thing that breaks my heart. So it hurt me to see that not only was I feeling, the strength of, this man's words, but like the other people were, and they were feeling the need to attack themselves instead of saying anything to him. So when I went up for my turn, I took a really deep breath and I was like, hey everyone, like I had set plan for tonight. I worked really hard on it. I really wanted to perform that for you guys, but I just want to get something off my chest before we start. And he was sitting in the front row. I took a huge deep breath and I go, "You ugly motherfucker." And I started yelling at him. Just I broke down everything that was wrong from him head to toe appearance wise. Then I dug into his personality. I dug into him stealing jokes from Steve Martin. I dug into all of it. And then at the end, I talked about how hard it is to be a fat person. And then I have to come here and hear that bullshit too. Like, I can't do this. So I blacked out all of the specifics of what I said to him. I did get told that it was a verbal ass ripping of the century, is what it has been described to me in hindsight. But then, ever since then, that really divided the local comedy scene for me of people who would rather suck that guy's dick than be on my side of things. So they would rather tell that guy like he did nothing wrong and he's funny and that edgy comedy is supposed to be that way and like we're here to challenge people and all that business. Then people being like, no, I'm glad you said something to him and told him that that was wrong. So then when I would go at that up at that mic again, a whole half of the room would walk when it was my turn on stage, like to show solidarity with that horrible man. And then like of course they would come back when I was off stage. So right before the pandemic, it was getting to the point where I was like, is going to this mic counterproductive to my mental health? And do I need to
Yeah.
take a break from it for a while? And it really sucks that like a venue that is so sentimental to me. That was the first place I ever did stand-up comedy. I built that stage with my dad. And now because I stood up for myself and the other people in the room who are feeling the same way I did, like, is that like it didn't feel right to me that the way that the scene was shifting, that he got more entitlement to that space than I did. And he actually posted to Facebook what I feel is somewhat of a valid criticism of me, where when he was saying other offensive things, so like about other different marginalized groups, because you know he's amazing. I didn't speak up about that. I didn't speak up for those people in those moments. I waited until it was a personal attack to me to say something. And that has really helped me, that criticism from him has helped me reevaluate how I interact with other people who do comedy that I think harms the space. And my personal stance on that is like, if you harm the comedy community, you have forfeited your right to that community. And so I've been enforcing that in the new community that I found online with like calling people out on their bullshit. So thanks, I guess. But yeah, so being a fat woman, especially, has really changed my relationship with my local scene, like
Hmm.
pretty heavily.
I mean, and that's pretty intense, the whole thing going around. And it's just like, it's very powerful. Like, you helped build, literally build that stage. And then to have it like basically kind of, destroyed, or he was damaging it and like the whole thing for you.
Mm.
I can only imagine like how you felt that night. I can only imagine that that was very emotional. And it's unfortunate that that caused that divide. Although, I mean, we know that there's always going to be people who will side with people like him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, do you really, I guess you could kind of say, do I really want them anyway in my corner? But it's still
Mhm.
unfortunate because any division is a division, right? So
Yeah, and like no matter what, I still feel down to my core that he had just as much of a right as me to be on that stage. Even though I do not find him funny, even though I find his content to be offensive, I still feel like he had as much of a like an equal right to being on that stage as I did. And then like just how all that transpired showed to me that like none of them feel like I deserve to be there, like they deserve to be there.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't walk out when they're on stage. If they have a problem with something I said, I welcome them to come challenge me and tell me about it, right? I
Yeah.
feel like but they would rather have that room to be edgy and be offensive. Which another beef that I have with edgy comedy is that it is so hack in that what are you saying that a 12-year-old bully hasn't already said? Like, what are you adding to the conversation that you have to say so bad? So that's a whole separate beef. But they would rather have that space to be bullies, the bullies that they never got to be when they were kids, I guess, than to make sure that like this is a safe creative space. And I don't get along with that. I don't get
Yeah.
along with that.
Yeah. I haven't done open mics in a long time mostly because I've been lazy and everything. But I remember when I first got into comedy, because of course I wanted the experience, I wanted all of that. And I used to hate when people usually often men, although there weren't that many women usually there to begin with, they would leave the room, and I would get so upset. And like, they were the smokers, so that was their excuse. It's like, well, you really couldn't wait. You know what I mean? It'd be like the whole room would clear out and there'd be like two people left. I'm like, that's nice, but I don't miss
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I'll say I don't miss that.
It's definitely strategic that way of like, "Oh, cool, you picked the woman to"
Hmm.
you're like, "Oh, now's a good time."
Yeah. Oh, I needed this smoke, but oh yeah, this woman's on stage. Yep, this is perfect timing. And I'm gonna take my
Perfect
whole
timing.
posse with me.
Yeah, right?
Oh, well, I have enjoyed talking with you so much. What in wrapping up here, and I say this every week because it is true. I love having these conversations, and normally I could talk for hours with whomever I'm speaking with. And I agree. I feel like that same way with you because we could dissect comedy, humor. We could dissect this in so many different ways. I would love to have you back another time. But in closing tonight, is there anything else that you would want to say before we wrap up? And then, of course, I want to have people find out where is the best place that you'd like them to follow you or connect with you.
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanna say thank you so much for having me. And also I wanted to add that I really respect and admire in almost an envious way your relationship with comedy and where you found yourself in making, situations that work for you and that are creatively satisfying to you and that jive with your morals as much as they jive with your, uh strive for, creative satisfaction in comedy and humor. And I think I want like a little bit more of that applied to myself and what I choose to say yes to and what I choose to say no to. So I admire that about you.
Thank you.
Um, and oh man, I don't know if I have I don't know if I have anything else.
Oh,
I feel
that's all
like
right.
it's one of those things where I'll be, we'll have hung up and, and an hour will go by and I'll be like, "Ah, I should have said this to Janine." So,
So where can people or where would you like them to connect with you and maybe if they want to check out your comedy or just connect?
so I am best found and accessible, I would say, on Twitter. And my Twitter handle is Aliya, Aliya, Angela 522. And I am also that handle on Instagram. And you can be my Facebook friend, weirdo. Add me as a Facebook friend. Anyone listening can be my Facebook friend, unless if I have talked bad about you tonight, then you're blocked already. So lucky me.
So don't
Uh,
try.
yeah.
All right, cool. Well, and as Aliya mentioned earlier too in the show, and I will post this as well when the podcast airs. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of places where you can check out great comedy. Aliya and a whole bunch of other folks at Steel Stacks watch for all that good stuff. The like the pajama kind of overnight kind of. I can't. I'm like the pajama overnight kind of. What the hell am I trying to say?
Slumber party stand-up
Yeah, that's the
showcase.
word.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
God. I'm like,
I post updates on anytime I have an online show also on my
okay.
Facebook. So if there's anybody who's like, "Wow, I wanna hear that story in full about that guy on Hinge," add me on Facebook and I will share links to when I have online Zoom shows and stuff.
Very cool. And I hope to this summer because I am a dork, like I said, with my driving. I hope to get down there and check out a show, be in a show at some point. I'd love to see all the stuff you have. And I'd love to see the one where you're rewriting the Tender profiles. That sounds hilarious, honestly. I mean, and Mad Libs, my gosh, how much fun is the Mad Libs kind of thing? Like that's really cool.
Mhm.
I think that's fun. All right. Well, thank you so much, Aliya Brown. The world needs more of you, your laughter, all your good stuff. And I think you're just a very effervescent person. And just you got a lot going on and just keep spreading the joy and the laughs because we certainly
Thank
need it.
you.
So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, my audience, for listening to another episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This has been Funny Wine Girl, Janine Luby. Be sure to also check out Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl on YouTube to see my guests. Sometimes they have cool props. Tonight we didn't break into the prop bags because we're not Carrot Top. But anyway, check it out. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Funny Wine Girl Janine. And as I always say, remember to subscribe to the podcast and share it if you liked it. If you didn't like like it, tell your goldfish, tell your dog, or feel free to message me privately where you can criticize me or offer me some good critiques. But thank you again. I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.